Well, hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening. I'm standing just in case we need to get that out of the way. So, my name's Dave O'Connell. I'm up here from Nashville today, and I'm really happy to be here. I run the Friends of Harvard Baseball, which is a fundraising group that supports our players down here in front, past and present. And we're really excited to have all of you here tonight. So thank you for being here. Thanks to everyone for making this appearance. Appreciate it. We're going to get started with the program. I'm going to introduce our friend Jon Morosi. What class are you, John? John's 04. He's going to come up and introduce this esteemed panel, and we're going to talk baseball this evening. So thanks to all of you for being here. We're going to get started now. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me here, especially given that my only playing background was as a slap-hitting second baseman on the JV team, which means I was a slap-hitting second baseman on a team consisting entirely of slap-hitting second basemen. And thanks to the gentleman to my left, they put up with my questions a lot during the course of the season as I try to divine what they're all doing, and so I am grateful to them for letting me be here and actually ask them questions that they're somewhat obligated to answer, which is actually pretty cool to have this unique venue for me as a reporter. I'll introduce the five gentlemen here in order of distance traveled, greatest distance traveled. So, from 3,095 miles away, the GM of the Oakland A's, Harvard class of 1998, David Forst. From 1,966 miles away, the Senior Vice President and GM of the Colorado Rockies, Harvard class of 2000, Jeff Bridich. From 1,495 miles away, the President of Baseball Operations of the Miami Marlins, Harvard class of 1993, Michael Hill. From Park Avenue, New York, 208 miles away, the Senior VP of Baseball Operations of Major League Baseball, Peter Woodfork, class of 1999. And from one T-stop away, the VP of Player Development for the Boston Red Sox, Harvard class of 2002, Ben Crockett. So as we think about those miles traveled to come back here to celebrate three great institutions, the game of baseball, Harvard, and Harvard baseball all together, I want to begin the evening by asking you, maybe also in order of distance traveled, as you were coming here, I guess first David, your thoughts about why we're coming here, why this was a special journey for you to make at this time of year. You've got a lot of travels coming up in your season, spring training, less than a month away now. What memories were you reflecting back on, and what brought you back here tonight? And then I'd like to invite everybody else to follow in as well.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think it's a great way to start. I just want to make sure we're off the record here, right?
Off the record. I am not tweeting the rest of the night.
Every time John texts you or emails you, you got to know, is this background? Are you going to quote me?
What are the rules?
Well, no, thanks for the introduction, and thank you all for being here. This is a special group for us, and people we get to talk to every day about what we do. But it ultimately started here, and we had a chance as a group to meet with the current team earlier tonight and let them know just how big a part Harvard, and specifically Harvard baseball, plays in our lives really on a daily basis. I mean, we all got opportunities to get where we are because we were in this place. John mentioned Mr. O'Donnell earlier. Joe was a huge part of all of our careers and endowing the program, the field. Joe Walsh, who came in as a coach when I was a sophomore, was a huge part of our development. And it's hard to overstate what this program has meant to us and our ability to stay in the game. We all played, we all thought on some level we could continue to play the game for a while. And when that part of your life ends, the door that opens to work in this game is pretty special, and it's a chance to be a part of a different team, a chance to compete and to win and lose as a group. But it's the things on the field, the Harvard baseball experience that has meant so much to us, and really, talking with Dave O'Connell got us to want to do an event like this and share our experience, raise some money for the program, which is critical, but let these guys know what a lot of people in this room know, the guys who've played for generations, how important this program is when you go out there into the world. And there are obviously guys played generations before us who feel that same way, and we are lucky to carry it on and want to hope that this group here does the same with it.
Me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking all of my thoughts, Dave Forst. To echo what Dave said, I have such unbelievable memories of what happened on Joe O'Donnell Field, and the other, Ivy League fields that we played on and won a lot of games, and it's just so many readily available memories from our time in uniform. In my office in Denver, I've got, Peter was mentioning to the team earlier, there was a comeback win in '99 where we had to come back to win the Ivy League championship, and it was a true full team effort to do that. And it was a walk-off type of an operation. And there's a picture, he's in it, I'm in it, it's a dog pile picture. And that's in the corner of my office. I see it every day when I go in. And, nobody really asked me about it. I don't, that's not for anybody else, but it is for me. And I think the hope here is that those types of memories can be for these guys here that are wearing the uniform and that are coaching. And, I always say to people, when they ask me, so what's the most impressive thing about Harvard and Harvard this and Harvard that? And rarely do I say the teachers or the TAs or the professors or this or that. I say it's the fellow students that I went to school with. And it's the people that I studied with. It's people that I played ball with. It's those people were the most impressive. Those people were the ones pushing me. And so for all those experiences that I think can kind of share and collectively had as ball players there, we'd like to try to pay it forward as best we can. And we're hopeful that these guys and then the next generation of ball players that wear a uniform can do the same.
No, it's great to be back here. Jon, you're talking about the flight up here and the flight from beautiful sunny Florida and 70 degrees to the 30 degrees and the rain. But I really took time just to think back just to my 4 years here and when I walked through the doors and just a young kid from Cincinnati, Ohio, never really thought I was ever going to be an Ivy League graduate, let alone come to Harvard and get the opportunity to spend 4 great years, play 2 sports here, and just build so many memories. And I think back to I was talking to some of the team. My freshman year was the first year of the Bean Pod, and as a freshman, I got the opportunity to play left field. So I'm a 18-year-old kid from Cincinnati, Ohio, coming to Harvard University, and I'm playing left field at Fenway Park. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But that's just one of the few things when you think about just what this university and what this program has done for me. I was fortunate enough, I got drafted, once I graduated. Didn't play for very long and started my front office career, but when I graduated, it was Coach Walsh coming to Florida at the time, and so I went over and I talked to David and Peter when they were still playing, and at that point, I didn't know what my career was going to be, but I just knew how special Harvard and Harvard baseball was for me, and I wanted to let them know that whatever it was in front of them, that, take advantage of this opportunity and make the most of it. And, you never know what's in store for you, what the future will hold. But I do know that the times and the competition that we had here, meant so much to, sort of laying that foundation to bigger and better things.
Yeah, as Jeff said, I think Mike really covered most of it. But it's even different for Ben and myself. I was lucky enough that I grew up in this area, so I knew what Harvard was about, and being able to get there and being able to play there, and the help that you receive and what you get from the community. Joe O'Donnell, I had played against John O'Donnell, and you really, I was talking to him and the people you come back to see here, and everyone who's helped you get there, and most of it is Harvard people, and that's when you move on to your job. Jeff Bridich, you're younger than me at school, helped me get my first job into baseball. David Forst, Ben, Mike, I talk to them every day. I'm probably the luckiest person in this line because I don't have to win every night. No. I also oversee the umpires, so I don't know if I win every night anyway. But
yeah, pick your poison.
Yeah, it is a pick your poison. But you know what? It's good to be able to call them and you're not in that competitive mode. More of, okay, what can we do for you and what can we make better? So, again, coming back to what you're thinking here. I spent the last 7 days with 76 Major League umpires in Arizona, so Joe West was often on my mind. But
You're sure you're the luckiest one up here, Peter?
That being said, it really was, coming home for me. This is where home is. I grew up in Boston. You're at Harvard, and that's what's great. Outside of Mike, as I said, I played with each one of these people, and to see them up here today and the things you did back in college is, it's impressive. And it took a little bit of everyone in this room to help it happen. And I think that's the important thing. It's how you can get people to give money to a program at Harvard. That makes a lot. But understanding that money is going to help guys. They're going to get to where they want to go, and that's part of it. So, again, I'll go quickly because I think these guys have hit most of it.
It's great going last.
You have nothing to say now.
Sorry, Ben. This is the last time I'll make you do that.
Everybody said. Yeah. A lot of the things that people have already brought up, but the memories that stand out to me really are, a combination of the winning moments, which wasn't throughout our career, but the winning moments of walk-off win as freshmen and kind of getting inundated and hey, this is what Harvard baseball is all about, and knowing the tradition that we were coming from, being able to watch, hear stories about Dave Forst and watch, Peter Woodfork lead and Jeff Bridich and look up to these guys, and knowing where the program had come from, and winning, and that to me was a huge draw, and something that I think our class and those that we played with really took a lot of pride in, is trying to, is really trying to hold up the tradition of those that have come before us. So, those winning moments, both getting a walk-off as a freshman to win the Ivy League and then a walk-off as a senior to get into the Ivy League championship, which, we ended up taking care of. Those are probably the two big on-field moments. And then, echoing, I think, what Jeff said, the thing that you think about more often and that sticks with you is having, your closest friends and the people you rely on most in your life today, 16 years later, be your teammates and the people you share a dugout with, when you were here. So.
And Ben, you mentioned the tradition and the legacy that's here today. I think it's important to note that actually no university in this country can claim this number of GMs and VP level employees in terms of baseball operations chiefs. We were talking about earlier, the whole list. Harvard leads the pack, not surprisingly, but it's true. And David Stearns as well in Milwaukee, we can add to that list. And speaking of this, we could actually have, based on the group we have here, we could actually, if you want to, and if you have to take a moment to retire to the cloakroom to actually figure out a 3-team trade, Peter Woodfork could actually approve it. So we actually have a one-stop shop for an entire 3-team transaction on the dais. So if you must pause, if we can find a way to, maybe spin Christian Yelich to the Rockies or something. I'm just saying, it would help the notoriety of the event here in the first installment of it. Just keep in the back of your minds. Keep in the back of your minds.
Yeah, Mike. So what's it going to be?
Back up the truck.
Yeah. Gee, where have I heard that before?
By the way, we'll report back maybe from the bar later on. We'll see if that might help move things along as we go forward. But I think for those of us that have graduated from Harvard and moved out into the real world, so to speak, you have that moment when in your first job, depending on where your first job is, where you realize you're coming to be known among your peers as the Harvard guy or the Harvard graduate. So that you come out and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's my identity? What's my path forward? And I wonder, maybe I'll start with David. You go to play independent ball. So you graduate from Harvard, you go to play independent ball in Springfield, Illinois, for the Springfield Capitals, right?
That's right.
For 2 seasons. How much were you aware when you thought about it? You had your friends that were going off to consulting jobs, probably different jobs in management, maybe business school, law school, and you had to think about, okay, I'm doing something that's unique. That is not what the rest of my group is doing, my peer group. How hard was that, and how much time were you going to give yourself to let this whole baseball thing unfold?
Well, whatever amount of time it was more than my mom wanted. But look, we've talked about this over the course of the night. I talked to some of the current team about it. I mean, when you still feel like you can play, that's something that's hard to shake. And a number of us up here, when we were done playing here, felt like, okay, there's more. Ben and Mike were lucky enough to be drafted. I played, like you said, 2 years independent ball because it wasn't out of my system. But you are going to a place, certainly, where, like you said, you are the Harvard guy. I mean, it's a combination of players who didn't get drafted and guys who've been released. I mean, I'm there as a 22-year-old college graduate. There are 20-year-olds who signed for a couple grand out of high school and then got released and have nowhere else to go. So you do recognize you're different, but you also recognize there's a shared passion. And everybody who's out there playing, and then the transition out that, everybody who's out there interning or working in this game is there because you love baseball. So, I was lucky enough that independent ball was my internship. I got a full-time job with the A's. Paul DePodesta, who was class of '95, was the assistant GM and hired me because we knew some people in common, but I didn't have to go through the internship. It's so competitive now. The game is so different. But you do sort of recognize your obligation as graduating from this university and everybody, looking at you and say, okay, what are you bringing to it? More as a player, I would say, particularly now because we are in a different time where the game is diverse, where you didn't have to play in order to be in the jobs we're, which is great. It's added a lot to the game.
And David, you mentioned being different. Mike, I want to ask you about the briefcase that you brought to the New York Penn League, to the ballpark every day. You told the story to the team earlier, but I think it's such an important lesson about embracing that and how you knew, even as you were playing, what that next step could be for you.
Well, I think David talked about it a little bit. Just, we love this game. We have a passion for the game. My original plan when I was still at Harvard was to get drafted, play for 20 years, and then, retire from a Hall of Fame career into a front office. But, as life would show you, it's a game of adjustments. And, I was a little beat up from football. And when I got drafted, I had spoke to Pete Moroka, a teammate of one of my teammates, Jim Moroka, who was class of '92, just about the path to the big leagues and just how difficult it is. And we know how hard it is. Over 1,500 kids get drafted every year, and 3% of them will make it to the big leagues. So I knew that the numbers of it, it was going to be a challenge. But I knew I wanted to give it a shot. But I went into it with my eyes open, and I knew that, to be on that prospect path, if you were on that prospect path within the first couple years of your career. And after I was 3 years in, I knew I was not on the prospect path, but I knew I wanted to stay around the game. I knew that I wanted to continue this fraternity, be a part of this fraternity, this wonderful, incredibly special game that we're a part of in baseball. And so I used some of the skills that I learned here at Harvard, networking one-on-one. I tried to meet as many people as I could in the game. I talked to scouts, I talked to front office people, just get their perspective of how they got into the game, what was their background, what classes did they take, what did they do. And one of the people I met was the farm director of the Atlanta Braves at the time. We were playing a spring training game, and I always ended every conversation that I had by politely asking if I could give him my resume, because this was the early 90s. There was no cell phones, and computers were barely being introduced, and email wasn't, what it is now. And so I lived out of my briefcase. I had all of my bills, I had all my student loans, all of it was right there in my little briefcase. But I also had a little sleeve where I had some resumes that I would, conveniently drop off to whomever, would ask for one. And so I asked him if I could give him my resume, at some point, and he said sure. And so my briefcase was back in my locker. And when the game was over, I finished my conditioning, sprinted up to the clubhouse, grabbed my resume, and met him by the time he got into his car. And you just never know, chance meetings, encounters. We talk about taking advantage of this place. But later that year, he was named the first GM of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays at the time. Miraculously, he still had my resume, which I never really asked him how he still had that, but he had my resume, and he called me. He said he was the new GM. He was building an organization, and if I wanted an entry-level job, and I said, let me know when and where, and I was there a week later, and that was 24 years ago.
So having the resume, being ready to network in the moment, changed your life.
I would say so.
Change your life. My one, and for whatever it's worth, just as the journalist up here, I'm still a big fan of the handwritten note. I still use it in my life, in my career. I still think there's something about someone taking the time to write the note on an actual piece of stationery. It's obviously great if it's one of those high-quality stationaries. I think it just leaves a good impression. I am, for whatever it's worth, that 20 seconds, has stuck with me. My mom gave it to me, and I still stay with it now. So, Ben, I want to ask you something, because you're the closest, both in terms of playing to the minor leagues and then in your job right now to the minor leagues. So you sort of have a job that really touches up with the amateur game a little bit. As you think about this program, and you're through your job familiar now with a lot of college programs all around the country, what are the unique attributes of this program, and what are maybe some of the challenges that a program in the Ivy League has to encounter as well?
Yeah, good question. I mean, in my role, overseeing the minor league, the Red Sox minor leagues, I think this program brings people from all over the country. So I think you have a bit of a melting pot in and of itself. With a diverse group of players and experiences. But, I think there's and I touched on it earlier, I think there's a pride that goes with wearing the Harvard uniform that in a lot of ways, probably mirrors wearing a major league uniform. I think that the history that matches organizations, and surpasses, quite a few. So I think to me that, I think that's something that really stands out within a program like this. And the things that you learn, the people that you're exposed to here, are I think help prepare you for whatever your next steps are in life, whether that's in baseball, whether that's outside of baseball. And I think the exposure you get here and the development that you do, and growing up, really, maturity is so great here that gives you a leg up on a lot of guys coming from other places. Perhaps you don't get to play quite the same schedule as somebody in the SEC, but I think some of the challenges that you face being in the Northeast, having more limited resources, I think in a lot of ways helps cultivate a group of guys that that can really grind and that can really, be resilient. And I think resiliency is something we talk about all the time in the minor leagues, because as we all know how much this game knocks you down. I think being able to get through the things that you guys get through up in the Northeast and at a program like this, I think those things set you apart.
And Jeff, to pick up on something Ben talked about the process of maybe getting to Harvard and playing baseball and the process of getting to the major leagues. I think we all realize, anybody that's been admitted to Harvard A lot of luck is involved in that packet arriving to your front door. A lot of people are involved in helping you get there. I wonder how understanding what it's like to have that dream realized at 18 informs the way you've maybe handled tough decisions when you realize the player sitting across from you has a dream as well. And they're trying to get to the major leagues, which, as we know, in our society is one of the more egalitarian pursuits that we have in our country, that if you have the talent and you have the health, many times you'll be able to get there. How have you maybe managed some of the more difficult decisions where you realize you're literally, with your roster and your numbers, holding a young man's dream in your hands?
Well, I think I first really, specifically with that lesson, I first learned it in the job that Ben has right now. Michael, you've done that job. I mean, I think we've all, to a certain degree, of the player development job, the director of player development, or whatever that title is. In a lot of ways, it mirrors the gravity of the job, the breadth of the job, the number of people that you feel responsible for and responsible to. The attention to detail in these people, not just as players and athletes, but as people, as human beings, especially, like you said, when they're 18 years old and they really, all of a sudden some of them are instant millionaires. They have absolutely no idea how to live their life, not just as instant millionaires, but as 18-year-olds away from home. And a lot of guys that have never failed before, truly failed. Mm-hmm. A lot of guys that have been told their entire lives, you're the greatest, and sometimes that's the truth, based on where they come from. So I learned how to care about that person and that person's dreams, just like, I had all those dreams of getting to Harvard and playing ball and whatever else afterward. That job in particular is really was really a testing ground and a proving ground for my career. And you learn from the mistakes that you make. And when you make mistakes with those types of people, it hurts, because you have that sense of when you release a minor league kid and you know that this is the last time he's going to play ball. It's different. It hurts more for me than it is when we release a big leaguer that we know is probably going to get a job somewhere else. And he's probably going to make millions of dollars somewhere else. And that kid, those tears that happen from that 25-year-old kid that you're releasing out of maybe high A ball, that hurts more than all the times I've sat with a big leaguer and said, I'm sorry, we don't have a spot for you anymore. We're going to have to let you go. And those are lessons learned over time, right? And you have to care about the people. But I do think that, along with that, to kind of piggyback on what Ben said, one of the biggest lessons for me that I've learned through all of that is that iron sharpens iron. And that is 100% a part of how we try to do our jobs with the Rockies. Hiring people that are smarter than you and more skilled than you and have different skills that can complement, and trying to train those people to be better at their jobs than I am at my job. That is a really important, that's how you advance not only an organization, but that's how you try to create, that's the culture that we have tried to create. And that's one of the lessons I learned early on. And you're really doing yourself a disservice and the organization a disservice when you don't put that at the forefront, because those types of people, if they are working with you and you're training them well and you are working alongside them, they will help you get the most out of those young players, especially. And if that's the job, and that's one of the most important jobs you have in the organization, that's a wonderful way to do it. And it's a lesson that I think I started to learn and started to understand as I talked about upstairs with the guys. That's what this program and Harvard in general can do for you, and it can be long-lasting if you learn that lesson now.
And Jeff, to pick up on this, and I'd love to throw this out to anybody that has thoughts on how you've conceived of this plan in your own minds, but you think about, Jeff, that what you talked about and the challenges inherent in Ben as well of a young player coming in to professional baseball. There's so much negativity inherent in baseball, right? The 300 hitter fails 7 out of 10 times. We're familiar with that. But also, I think even in the last 10 years, and listen, media is part of it. Social media, your batting averages are now known all over the place on various websites. And I'm sure, Mike, you remember when you were playing, it was Baseball America came once a month, and it might be in the clubhouse, but it was really one time a month, and then maybe one time a year where the prospects were ranked. And now it's perpetual. And you're getting Twitter feedback, and everybody knows how you're doing. how have all of you, and we're seeing now, I think, in the game, high performance, mental performance, different things to help maximize and sort of take care of the whole player. How have your philosophies evolved on that in the last 5 or 10 years, whether it's due to social media or just maybe a greater awareness of how to have the mind, body, and soul, so to speak, all in as good a position as you can find for a young player?
Well, we talked about it a little bit upstairs. You never stop learning at any point in this game, in life, whatever the industry is. You never stop learning. The game's changed so much. You know, David was on the heels of the whole Moneyball, and Depot, who was at Harvard when I was there, Paul DePodesta. You know, that revolutionized baseball when we started to look at different statistical metrics, and then analytics, you know, comes into baseball and really becomes a part of it. But you know, all of us, you know, you're just looking for ways to compete, that competitive edge that you think may give you that opportunity to win. And you know, we talk about all the things in the game, and you know, these guys won championships, and I had to wait until I got into the front office with the Marlins before I won my championship, won the World Series. But
you rubbing that one in?
Do you have any?
I got something in my eye.
I thought there might be a prop somewhere.
No, but
blinded up here.
Where were you, Mike? Sorry.
No, but you know.
Don't you feel like we're dealing with ever younger and younger players? I mean, you guys talk about your player development background and dealing with essentially kids, 18, 22-year-old kids, but the game over the last decade has shifted where those younger kids are now big leaguers. I mean, we're dealing at the big league level with really young kids, and the demographic has shifted, and these kids get to the big leagues because they're talented, but like you said, Jeff, they're not fully developed as people yet. So we are sort of caretakers in a way, not just at the minor league level, but even at the big league level, the caretakers for these 25 people who you have to somehow shape into a unit to try and win. Ultimately, we're sitting here trying to win. Everybody else on the field hopefully has that same goal, but it's not easy. You know, you say, what are you sort of looking for? These are young men, and like I said, ever increasingly younger men that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I just think that you always go back to the book you read from, and I always remember thinking to myself, A.J. Hinch, when I was in Arizona, you know, we hired A.J. Hinch, and it was to get that. We had a young team, and we wanted someone who had just come off the field and was younger and had a different background. And, you know, 4 months later, A.J. Hinch was 5 months later, bad season, everyone's fired, and it was really taken as craziness. You know, and our goal was to kind of get a coach who could handle young players and a changing young player, someone who was more in line. And 5 years later, 6 years later, I sat before Game 7 of the World Series, you know, overseeing umpiring, and AJ and I are sitting in his office, no one else around. And he's like, "Can you believe this?" Like 5 years ago, we were sitting there being like, "This is not working, we're done," you know, and both of us were unemployed. And, you know, 6 years later, it's a weird world. You know, things change quickly, and I think as the players have changed, so have the front offices, so have the people involved in baseball. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen is you'll get that diversity. You get diversity at Harvard. You see people from tons of different backgrounds bringing different perspectives. And when you get to baseball, it's the same way. You know, I oversee a group of human beings that, you know, high school educated, military backgrounds, not as typical as Harvard, you know, and the group here, but you see that they all bring something. I think that's what you learn at Harvard, that you get a group of people who are all going to bring something, and you get the best out of them. And that's something that this program helps to do. And, you know, again, as needs and wants, you know, I get to see a lot of my games. I see a lot of college games, you know, where recruiting umpires are doing those things. And the one thing that Harvard continually needs to give you is resources, and that's this program. You know, the program needs to continue to have resources, and be that batting tunnels or shoes. I say the same thing to David. You know, Robinson Cano came up earlier, but I remember Mario Rivera was in his last All-Star game, and Joe Torre's my boss, and they wanted Mariano to go out to the mound, and they're going to stop the game, and the manager's going to come out, and his family's going to come on the field, and don't tweet this, Jon Morosi.
I won't, I promise.
And you know, this guy had done everything. he had done everything for everyone, and he was tired, and he was like, I don't know if I want to do it, this, that, and Joe said, I know how to get him. He's like, Mariano, I have 5 iPads for you. And I was like, the guy makes like $18 million a year. 5 iPads are going to do it? 5 iPads? Great, Joe. Whatever you want, And it's, swag pays. Like, kids make decisions based on great school, great place, and those sneakers are really cool. It's why Michigan has great uniforms. Those are the things that are strange, and that's kind of what the program does. And there's a reason why Nike makes 104 uniforms for the University of Oregon. It's tough to get a kid from Los Angeles to go play in the rainy Pacific Northwest unless they got an unbelievable facility, unbelievable uniforms, and that's like the young guy makes his decisions on at 18. You're not making the best decisions, as Jeff and I can attest to as roommates. You're not making the best decisions at 18, right? But part of that decision making is what's influencing you, and part of what influences young people is, what they're getting back, and that's just the way that we deal with it today. And what we're giving back to them is this program has a lot of good things in baseball, a great academic school, a good family, but you need more and more, and that's the tough thing about it. It's weighing that. You can't give them everything, but you need to give them something.
I'll be a little bit more philosophical than the Nike. I'm not going to plug Nike like Peter did, but it's very difficult because you do bring together younger and younger people from very, very different backgrounds and changing backgrounds now, and you give them higher and higher expectations at earlier age. And so those pressures, if they are ignored, often manifest themselves in problems later on in their careers. We developed a philosophy of persistent patience with, in our development process. You can't just say, well, we're going to be patient with guys and we're just going to give them all the slack and all the rope in the world. That's great, and that needs to be part of it. But if there isn't a persistent push and you're paying attention to what's going on in these people's lives, your patience is going to be all for naught. And then I would say, in addition to that, finding key stakeholders in terms of culture building, in terms of learning from your peers, finding the guys that, as one of us, the suits, right, the Harvard, whatever they call us, finding the guys, the players, the guys who you really respect at whatever age, and telling them that you believe that they have leadership potential and that you expect them to help make their teammates better in an industry that is innately competitive, right? The guy sitting next to you might take your job one day. It might be tomorrow. But if you can find those people that somehow were raised in a much more of a cutthroat industry than we've ever been, if you can find those people and you can have that peer-to-peer push and that peer-to-peer interaction, that's been huge for us.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on Peter referenced some of the mistakes that you guys made when you were living together. I think today you can't, I think that it's a different climate, as Jon said, media-wise, right, where those things become the stories. And I think, with young players, they're going to make mistakes, and it becomes about trying to get ahead of potential things that may, ultimately get in the way of their careers, personally or professionally. And, I think that the challenges that young players today face are much greater for a lot of those reasons than they once were, because guys could make mistakes before, even at the big league level. Guys could make mistakes, whether it was on the field or off the field, and learn from those and get the repercussions would be the leaders on the team talking to them or the coaching staff talking to them, and now those things can go beyond that and can impact careers. So I think it's certainly a more challenging climate, as these guys have said. There's far more younger players reaching the big league level more quickly, and therefore they're less prepared. And I think the marketplace around them is as such that it is more challenging for them to succeed.
Love the perspective on this from all of you. And again, we'll open it up to all of you for questions, top of the hour, so just in a few minutes. I want to ask Peter as well, as we think about your role at the Commissioner's Office, I think safe to say a fairly robust conversation ongoing about how Major League Baseball will look in the coming years, whether it regards pace of play, other potential changes, mound visits, a lot of different conversations with the union happening right now. I'm not going to ask you to divulge that.
There's not much I want to say on that.
Yeah, I understand that. This is I have not forgotten what I do for a living, Peter. But I'll say this: as we look to the future, 5-10 years down the road, and I'm not going to ask you to speak for the commissioner, but I think if you look at the big picture and a lot of thought being put into our game at the commissioner's office level, and a lot of people giving a lot of serious consideration to it, how do you think maybe the people on Park Avenue would love to see even a college team like this Harvard team? How should college baseball look? How should minor league and eventually Major League Baseball look if, in fact, these changes and new habits will take root at this level?
Yeah, that's a good one. No, I think it's, if you look, and you can just look what the commissioner says publicly. So, I'll kind of reiterate him. It's a global game. It's a global sport. It's something that needs to push forward in other countries. So, for us, we do spend a lot of money trying to grow the game, internationally. And it doesn't always help. We hear a lot from the clubs. It's more of a, it doesn't help David Forst win his Oakland Athletics game that night, but we spend a lot of resources towards growing that game in both, be it inner cities and the lack of, African American players that we have today. It's something we focus on. We spend a lot of time in, and we ask a lot from our clubs to give. But it's reflective. I always thought that, and we all took this class at Harvard, a long time ago. But Professor Gnapp, a history professor at Harvard, taught this course called baseball. Straight out, one baseball. 5,000 people would sign up for it. Easy baseball, that's pretty good, and it's better than rocks or whatever I took with Walkie out there.
It still exists apparently, rocks.
Yes. But it was a tough. But it was really just history through the viewpoint of the baseball game, right? So, from the civil rights movement to other things that had happened. But the most interesting thing is I think baseball has always been reflective. Commissioner Steele used to say it's kind of a social perceptions. What's going on in the country is usually pretty reflective of what's going on in baseball. So, again, as the country becomes more and more diverse, I think the game and the goal is to have the game look that way. And we fight that same thing in front offices. Mike's one of our few people of color that's a general manager, that's a final decision maker. And I think we push hard to try to get more of that inclusion because, again, the game's not going to be great unless it includes everyone. And I think that's been the real push. And much like your team, you need to have the inclusion to make it work, be it in background, be it in, tough guys from the Northeast versus soft guys from California that play well. I mean, that's what we do.
Why do you point at me every time you say that?
Wow.
But I mean, again, all five of us, Benny and I are from close to each other, but the rest of us are all over, and those backgrounds all come differently. And, what Jeff brought to the table is different than the next guy. I think that's what you kind of see in the game and what you see around this room.
Yeah, John, your question's about, what does the game look like? And we are, in our positions, effectively stewards of the game at the highest level. So I think you always have to think on a macro level. What are you doing? How, like Peter's job in the commissioner's office, how do you grow the game? We're constantly thinking, how do you win that night? But a lot of us have been in this job long enough to know it's important to think about the game as a whole. And I think what we have more than anything is a game that kids love to play. I don't see anywhere, at least in my part of the country, anywhere where the problem is kids playing the game. What we have are issues with people watching and following the game. And you mentioned pace of play, and it's something that's in the news a lot. And we have 3+ hour games when every other sport out there has, a more defined time frame. So we have to think globally about how you keep people interested. And it's no secret that the fans and the networks and the people who are paying the bills ultimately are demanding something that we need to change. So I think we're starting from a great base with kids and young people who love to play, and how do we capture that next generation and not just the young people, but I think we're losing some people in this room based on the pace of game, the time of game, and when you say that about people who love baseball but can't necessarily watch a 4-hour game, your team mostly. I think it's important that as stewards of the game, like you said, we figure out ways to adjust. And Mike talked about adjustments earlier, adjust to keep our game fresh and compete with the other leagues. But I do believe that, I have a 7.5-year-old who's in a little league with 1,600 other kids. Kids like playing the game. That's not a problem. We have to make sure that translates to keep them as fans throughout. But Peter's office has that job, but we all have to think about it on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, people like to go to games. We have 75 million fans, which I know people question. It's not to watch the game, because you'll go to a baseball game, and what makes it great is you can kind of pay attention. You can drink beers to your friend. It's a social, great time to do it. It really is how to adjust to watching the game on television, watching the game on your iPad. It doesn't fit as well in that category than it does because, again, you grow up and it's a social. For your parents, for people who watch it, they're there to watch the game and make friends with the guy 3 rows ahead of them. Where it falls apart is when you go to commercial for 3.5 minutes and there's 6 pitching changes and a lefty and a righty, and that's the tough thing about kind of what Harvard's done to this game generally is that everyone wants to get the most out of everything, so it's lefty, righty, lefty, righty, lefty, righty, and that's bad television.
Well, as TV people, we of course are concerned, right? But Mike, I want to ask you, as a dual sport athlete, you played football and baseball here at Harvard. When you think back now, a generation later, how rare is the dual sport athlete at the collegiate level in your experience? And now, how does baseball find a way? I don't know if win is the right word, but to win the argument for more 12, 13, 14-year-olds to have baseball, if they have to make a choice, for baseball to be that choice?
I think that's a great question, and we're talking about what the game's going to look like in a few years, or and the pace of game and all of that is important. But I'm the father of 3 boys, and for me, I have them all playing baseball. I played football, and I enjoyed the time that I played football. I think the whole concussion thing is hopefully, that's a little opening for baseball to maybe take advantage of opportunities there, because we need more. We talk about my role in the game, and Al Avila and I are the 2 minority general managers in the game. It's great when you look at Coach Deck's team and you see diversity on the team, and that wasn't the case when I was there. I was the only person of color there for my 4 years. It switched off a little bit. For my 4 years, I was the only one who played baseball. On the football team, we had like 8 on the football team. So things have changed on the football team. It's great to see this with the baseball team. I think the commissioner's initiative on the whole is something important to continue to grow, because I grew up and I saw a lot of faces that looked like mine playing the game, and that sort of stoked my fire and my passion to play the game. And the father of 3 boys, it's a lot more challenging when they don't see those faces on TV, but they still like baseball because they get to go on the field and run around. But I do see that as a challenge that the commissioner's office and Peter and Commissioner Manfred, they put a focus just to bring awareness to how great our game is. And you brought up the international component a little bit earlier. It's a third of our game. So the game is changing and growing globally. And you hope that people get that bug, and events like this, you hope that you can just create that exposure so that people have the passion. We're in this game because we love it. I've dedicated my life to baseball because I love what I do. The most enjoyment I have, is when the game starts and that first pitch happens, and it's heaven. Before your closer blows the game.
That's my least favorite word.
No, but it's a tremendous sport that we're a part of, and a lot of the things that I've been exposed to, I never in a million years thought that I would have that opportunity. Just from my background. To come here, and everybody's talked about just the diversity that Harvard brings. When you get here, it's not about how much your parents make or what your parents do. You're all here on equal footing. You're all men of Harvard, and you're all trying to take advantage of everything that this place affords you. And that's why I'm here tonight, and that's why I know these guys are here, because that's what it's all about, is continuing to build it and to pay it forward, and for you guys to take my spot and take my seat after your 20-year career playing in the big leagues or whatever it might be, because that's the opportunity in front of us. So.
Well, Mike, you mentioned the globalization of the game, and I want to ask you, because I know you speak Spanish, how would you describe a circumstance where even a basic conversation, or maybe even an in-depth one with a player about a sensitive situation, or maybe helping to create that bond where your linguistic ability really helped you be a leader?
It just breaks down walls. We talk about bringing a 16-year-old from the Dominican Republic, whose family makes $1,000 a year, plucking them out of their country, dropping them in the States, and then telling them to go get 3 hits, on field 7.
Right.
During spring training, and it's an adjustment. And it started back when I was playing. I always tried to be sort of that liaison for all of our Dominican players, just to help them adjust to get comfortable in our country. To our customs, because they're in a foreign country, and I think that ability to communicate with them, and we talk about just the overall ability to communicate, be it you guys with us or whomever you're talking to, that ability to communicate just breaks down so many walls, breaks down so many barriers, and I know these guys will speak about some of the qualities that allow us to do our jobs and be effective and to run effective teams, and it starts with communication. Almost, 100% of the time.
Yeah, I would say communication, understanding. I would say probably one of the top 2 or 3 biggest lessons I ever learned in this game was when the first time that I went to the Dominican Republic. And I didn't just go to our nice complex, which at the time it was okay. It wasn't great. A lot of those, this was 10, 12, 14 years ago, whatever it was. And at that time, a lot of the complexes in the Dominican still and Venezuela were not real great. And they kind of reflected the third world nature of that country. But the first time that I went there, and I went to a 17-year-old kid, I went to his house, which basically was 4 walls and kind of a shanty, roof to it, and tin, and the insides were basically drawn curtains separating these 4 walls subdividing it into some different rooms, if you want to call them rooms, and his family, his mom, and his siblings came, and the food that they provided for us, right, as guests, they scraped together what they could, and the pride that the player had in showing the gringo, his home and his mom and his family, and to understand that, and then expect that kid 1 year later or 2 years later to come over and on field 7 to keep up with a bunch of college-educated kids that know what they're doing, speak the language, know where to go get food, know where to, nothing is foreign. Almost everything is foreign to these kids. So as we think about, how this game is global, I think it's important for people like us to truly go to the roots and understand the people that are entering this game and the people that we're responsible for ultimately, and that we're stewards for, like Dave said.
Empathy is very important in leadership, for sure. I want to ask one sort of fun question about trades, because we all of us that are fans of the hot stove, we love trades. And I know there have been, I did some research on this because I have not forgotten that I am a journalist here, looking at the trades among this group, okay, and I do think there would have been a trade that I'm guessing Mr. Bridich and Mr. Forst would have been involved in heavily when Matt Holliday went to the Rockies and Carlos Gonzalez went. Or Matt Holliday to the A's, Gonzalez to the Rockies. So what can you share if there was any Harvard to Harvard communication that helped get that deal across the finish line?
I think that one probably was more Billy and Dan.
Well, yeah, if you know Dan O'Dowd and Billy Bean, Dave and I didn't have a chance to get a word in edgewise. Like, there was no shot we were going to get a word in on anything public there.
No, but look, the great thing about the relationships up here is that we are able to have those conversations, and any trade discussion you have is as much really about the relationship as it is about the specific players you're talking about. You need someone on the other end to trust you. No one wants to feel like they're getting taken advantage of in a trade, but you have a relationship, you have a history with someone on the other end of the phone, and it allows you to do business together. I've talked to Jeff about deals. When Peter was with Arizona, we talked deals. Mike's hard to deal with. I can't get anything done with Mike. Really, Yelich. I would take Yelich.
We don't make deals. We don't make trades.
I need a center fielder.
Right.
We don't make trades in Miami.
That's what you call sarcasm, everybody.
All you do is hold on to your players. You sort of said a fun question about trades, but ultimately the relationships you have with everybody else in the game are determine whether you can make that phone call. And it's different from dealing with an agent or dealing with a player, because there's a give and take there. When you're dealing with one of your colleagues, there has to be a foundation there. There has to be conversation that is not just give me player X for player Y. There has to be something to base that on. So it is one of the more enjoyable parts of what we do, I think, is getting to talk to the 29 other clubs and see if there's a puzzle that you can put together. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it comes down to communication and trust, right? I mean, to pull off a deal like Matt Holliday for Cargo, there had to be a lot of things aligned, right? The needs and desires of the A's had to match the needs and desires of the Rockies at that time, right? And then there had to be good communication and a trust that you could share ideas with each other without things getting public, right? Without things that at the very base that we were going to be able to share things and try to edge towards a deal without some sort of huge block or lack of trust in that process.
But even that deal, Billy and Dan go back to when Dan was the assistant GM in Cleveland, Billy was the assistant GM in Oakland. They had some shared history. Anytime I get on the phone with Jeff, the first couple of minutes we're talking frankly about this place and who have you talked to recently? Have you caught up with so-and-so?
How's Brian Ralph doing? He's doing good. Yeah, he was a great player.
Right, or when have you been back? So there is, there's a friendship there at the beginning, and I'm guessing anyone in any business will attest to how important that is when you're trying to make deals, no matter what it is. We're not just talking baseball. That there is a relationship at the base of just about every transaction.
And that helps because if whether it's that trade or it's another trade, if you have that sort of relationship with and trust in that person, you want that trade to work out well for everybody involved, right? So the trade that we made, that I made. Corey Dickerson and a prospect to Tampa for German Marquez and Jake McGee a couple years ago. It has worked out. Corey Dickerson was an all-star this past year. German Marquez is part of our rotation. Jake McGee was a solid part of a bullpen. That trade, their prospect is up and coming a little bit. That trade works out. That's exactly what you want. You want both sides to feel like, hey, this was a good decision. This was the right decision. And you know what? The trust helped us get to that good decision for every party involved. That takes time, and it takes a lot of communication and trust.
So there's 29 other GMs that you could be talking to at any given time. How many would you say you're in touch with weekly, just as a guess? Most?
If I didn't have to talk to Peter so much, I'd have more time. You talk to 2 or 3 other teams a week, probably. Yeah. I mean, depending on the time of year. Obviously, if everybody's in the same place at the winter meetings.
Right. We're rebuilding, so I talk to everybody.
I have a question for you in a second, by the way. So hold that thought.
Peter has to talk to 30 every week.
Right.
So
I talk to a lot.
Yeah. So Mike. So I'm glad you brought that up. So. You've had an interesting off season. You opened the door, my friend.
It's been quiet. What are you talking about?
So I guess for our audience here, as much as you can share, what is in the journalism business we would call it the tick-tock, the process of trading a player as prominent as Stanton. Again, as much as you can divulge. I understand that there may be some things you can't, but how long does that take? And I know there were certainly some intermediate places where he almost went. I guess what can you share about Stanton to the Yankees? Because I think there's probably some interest in that particular story among our group.
Peter?
I recommend you skip that question, Mike.
You can if you have to say I then cleared it with anonymous member of the commissioner's office. You can say that if you have to. I understand.
No, let's just say it was more fun giving him the $325 million contract than it was trying to trade 10 years and $295 million.
Right.
But like with anything, and these guys, we've all been in the game a long time. We all have our objectives of what we're trying to accomplish with every deal that we make. And it was helpful that he was the reigning MVP,
Right.
and that he can hit the ball 600 feet. So you're dealing with a good player, and when you have a good player, it always makes the job a little bit easier when you have to make a trade. The fact that he did have $295 million going with him made it a little more challenging. David tapped out of that one pretty quickly.
Just a little bit too rich.
It didn't fit our payroll in any way.
He would have been the payroll, I believe. That would have been the entire payroll.
It was either Stanton or a stadium. One
Right.
didn't have both.
I called them and I said Stanton, and it went beep, 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 beep. Yeah, but it's just part of when you're trying to make a trade, you need, as Jeff alluded to, you need two people who have trust. And I've known Cash for a long time,
Right.
In New York, and actually before that, because I actually traded him 3 times,
Right.
The deal to San Francisco and to
St. Louis.
Still off the
Still
record.
off the record, yeah.
To St. Louis and San Francisco. But we all have relationships with our counterparts, and it's helpful for me that when I'm talking to David, or I'm talking to Jeff, or even when I'm talking to Dave Dombrowski, we've all been in the game long enough that you have a history. How they deal, and so if there's the makings of the deal there or not. And when you're talking about trading the reigning MVP, you have to talk to everybody. And so it has been a little bit busy this off season, and we're excited to get to spring training. But I was happy we were able to get it done, because it did take some time, because when you're talking about such a large contract, our game, we talk about how the game has changed so much. We talk about control and the ability to have cheap players.
Right.
That's invaluable in what we do, especially in our marketplace. Not so much for you, Ben. But for teams like David and I, we have to manage our payrolls. We don't have such deep pockets.
I think the Rockies have more money than we have this year.
We're still, of course, waiting for the Red Sox to counter the Yankees, and I sent an evite for this to JD Martinez, but apparently I don't think JD's here yet. Maybe Ben. Okay. We'll see if JD shows up later on. But I think I've asked enough questions for now. I think it's time for you to join in. We have the microphone, Trevor, I believe, right in the middle. So center of the center aisle towards the back. If anyone would like to step up, players, honored guests, anyone who'd like to step up, please do so. Go ahead.
Was waiting. First of all, thank you all. You guys have transformed baseball. And I managed the 78 team, and I think David alluded to, there was a time when Ivy Leaguers weren't invited into front offices. You had to be a former player. And I'm torn between an MLB question and a Red Sox question, but being a diehard local, I'll go with the Red Sox question, depending on how many there are. So for Ben, and you alluded to resilience. So we've seen this revolution that you were all part of with sabermetrics and money balls, and now every major league office must have analytics, right? It's not news. There's no competitive advantage. You have to do it, no competitive advantages. But my question is, what about things that go beyond the statistics and someone, when you're thinking about minor league evaluation or drafting, many of us in this room have hired people, and Boston's a unique community, whether it's politics or business or baseball. Do you look for something in here? Do you look for heart, for soul, for chemistry? And I think that, the 04 and 13 teams that won, they had something different. They weren't necessarily the best team on the field in terms of statistics, but they did it. And I think the Red Sox have made great trades the last few years, kind of miserable with their free agent signings, and it only takes a few guys to poison the well. And
This is a long question.
2 division championships, and yet a miserable bunch. So when you're doing all this evaluation, no, I'm serious. Are you thinking about something else beyond the stats and the numbers when you're thinking about putting together.
You can soft shoe out of here if you want.
I'm not blaming you. I want to know. No, seriously. No, you know what I'm getting about. You talked about resilience, so there must be something that you're looking at. I'm really curious what else you look at.
Sure. Well, I'm going to answer that question from my purview, which is more on the development and minor league side of things, because that's a little easier. So yeah, we focus incredibly on that. I think our amateur scouting department, and I'm sure other teams are doing the same thing, but have over the last 5 to 10 years have really emphasized spending a lot of time with amateur players before we draft them, particularly those that are going to require a big investment. And I think getting to know those, getting to know their character and understanding what they're passionate about and trying to get a feel for things like resiliency is incredibly important. And then I think within the minor league system, once they're here, we provide a support network of mental skills, kind of sports psychology coaches that we've really integrated in, that we see as one of the core fundamentals. Is the physical training, the fundamental skill development, but also the mental part of the game, which we all know. I mean, everybody that's played it knows, maybe way more important than the first two. So that's a huge part of what we do, and that's both educational for the players, support network for the players, but also education for the coaches to be able to build better relationships and communicate more clearly, with players, and ultimately get the buy-in and the trust that's needed to get a player, who signs at 16 or 18. And is reporting to the GCL for the first time away from their parents, hopefully a short time later, but at some time later, all the way up to the big leagues through the challenges of the minor league system.
Go ahead.
So in spring training this February, I'll be starting with the Diamondbacks as a video coordinator. Based on where you guys started out and just where I'll be starting, what advice would any of you have for me as someone who eventually wants to be on that side of the table, talking to people and leading teams? What would be your advice for me just over this next calendar year?
That's congratulations, by the way, on that one. I think you look at all these guys up here, and we all started at entry-level positions. I started as an entry-level position, and the one bit of advice, I mean, what your passion is, and one day you want to be sitting up here, but take care of the job at hand. Your primary task, take care of that. And then, what I always tried to do is I handle my main responsibilities, and then I asked for more. I was fortunate enough, I was working in Tampa, and so I'd go into the office early, I'd take care of all the administrative responsibilities that I had, and then I would go scout. And I'd go see players and write as many reports as I could just to build that frame of reference, for myself. But I had to make sure I took care of what my immediate job was, and then just tried to grow from there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Congratulations on the gig. And Mike's right. Kick butt at your job. Do your job really well, first and foremost. And then try to learn as much as you can. There's a difference between going in and trying to impress people and going in and trying to get the most out of every single day, not only for the organization, but for yourself, because you're obviously at a point where there should be a very steep learning curve, right? And there's a lot to learn. Ask good questions. Ask well thought out questions. And try to plug in and work your butt off the best way that you possibly can and what you're tasked to do. And that's what always impressed me about those types of people that came into our organization in the way that you are.
One last thing I'll ask. My grandmother told me this when I was real young, and you guys have all heard it. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so listen more than you talk. For me, I was with an expansion team, so everything was fresh, clean slate. The philosophy was built ground up. Everything we wanted to do, scouting, player development, was scratch. I'm a 23-year-old, fresh out of the minor leagues, and I was just a fly on the wall. And I listened to everything that was said. And the one thing that I tried to do was just put it into my own perspective. what would I do in this position? What would I do if I was, given this opportunity? Just so that, at some point when I was given the opportunity, it's something that I had given some thought to, and something that, just wasn't, happenstance. It was something that I felt like I had prepared for, and at least had my own opinion through my own experience, to give advice or my opinion.
Hey guys. It's clear you kind of follow what other teams in the league are doing very closely. Do you ever look to other sports, specifically someone like the New England Patriots, and say, okay, what is GM Bill Belichick doing to build his organization, and kind of look at those things and try to take it back to baseball? Or are they just curious?
Yeah, I'll take this, mostly because this is my teammate, Jamie Crowley, asking the question here. Pretty good left-hand hitting right fielder there. I think more than anything, what I look at are we talked about leadership, how other leaders run their organization. Belichick is a great example of someone who has complete control over every facet of the organization, and in our positions, the scope of the organization is so huge. There are players in other countries. There's coaching staff spread out around this country, and you can't micromanage everything, but you can set a tone. And I look, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, we do spend some time with people from other sports because, again, we're in the same business of trying to get a group together for one goal, to win. And you guys, in this area are lucky to have had Belichick and Brady to some extent, who's also a leader on the field. I mean, that is something that's incredibly hard to replicate, to get everybody on the same page like that. So from that end, from the leadership end, the games are different. Everybody, we have a game that is probably most suited to statistics and the one-on-one matchup. But from a management leadership type, I would definitely say other sports are critical to what we do.
Yeah, we've over the years we've worked to develop a relationship with an NBA team, highly successful team that I've got somewhat of a minor infatuation with. And we've tried to get to know them and understand them, because this question tends to be a double-edged sword a little bit. And you can definitely take lessons from other organizations, whether it's in baseball or especially from organizations in some of the other professional leagues. But you don't live with them, right? And so you really have to work hard to understand why they do the things they do and why certain decisions were made the way that they were made. What was the lead up to those things? And not living in that organization oftentimes can send you down, if you make some rash judgments, or you say, if you go too far down a rabbit hole or too far one way because of this, and you don't have a full understanding, that can be dangerous as you run an organization. So you kind of have to be careful. There's definitely risk and reward in that sort of an operation.
And Jamie, I'll just add one area that we've tried to focus on. We spend so much, invest so much in the mental part of it and the physical part of it, the strength and conditioning part of it. I like to talk to my counterparts with other professional teams just on the makeup part of it. Football, some of the other sports, they get combines. We don't have the opportunity to have a combine in baseball. And so a lot of times where we miss when we talk about our amateur scouting and why we have to spend so much time with our young players, and we encourage our scouts and all of our people to get into the homes, to talk to teachers, to talk to trainers, to talk to coaches, to talk to everybody possible to try to get the makeup of that player and how he ticks, because that is a big part of what we talked about, that resiliency. That is such a game of adversity of how they deal with it. So I have, and probably these guys have as well, you try to hear what your counterparts are doing in other sports, to see how they do that same thing. Because when you're talking about professional athletes, you're talking about the elite of the elite, and guys who are incredibly talented, but who aren't always successful. And there's some organizations that do it better than others. Patriots being one of them. I have a good friend with the Steelers who have a tremendous philosophy as well as how they identify players, and it was brought up about the consistency and the patience that you have in Colorado. it's, philosophically you have to commit to it. And that's something that, when you can identify, the right skill set, the right qualities of a championship caliber player, that's when you can build that consistent success. And I think that's, what we're all trying to do in our jobs.
Mr. Bridich.
Uh-oh. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. I know there's a number of us in the room who would like the panel maybe to talk a little bit about what kind of impact your mother's had on your success and where you have gotten to today. And I guess I'd like Jeff Bridich to start with that.
Yeah, Jeff, you're first.
This appears to be a public condemnation for not calling my mom enough on a weekly basis. No. Well, I'll say this. I mean, I can tell my own personal story to that. In that, when I got to Harvard and I was dropped off, by my parents, I really had no idea what I was in for at the time. I was, as I said upstairs, I was naive. I was, as I think back, I was scared. I was intimidated. I all of a sudden was with a bunch of East Coast Massachusetts people that had attitude and swagger and confidence and cockiness and some bravado and stuff that, was just kind of, was foreign to me. And there was a lot of part about my freshman year at school that I really struggled. I really did. I mean, I got grades that I had never gotten before, and I really had to kind of figure out how to right that ship. As I look back at it now, I was better prepared than I think I felt at the time, and that was my parents. They didn't panic when I started to struggle. I think they understood that my struggle there was going to ultimately be probably one of the biggest growth periods in my life, which it was. And some of those things weren't readily understood by me at the time. I understand them now, with how I was raised and the values that I was raised in, but I look back on it now, and I'm actually happy that I struggled like that. I'm thrilled that I did, and that bleeds into. I mean, you talk about player development. I mean, we push these guys to struggle. If you're drafted by the Colorado Rockies, if you don't struggle by the time you hit the major leagues, we have failed you. We have failed you. That's if you're struggling and you're really truly on the borderline of failure for the first time, with a third deck in front of 35,000 people and having people like Morosi splash all your crappy stats on your, if you can't handle that, if you haven't learned how to try to handle that prior to the big leagues, you're in trouble, and that's our failure. And it's one of the things, that's one of the major lessons I learned from school.
Real specific answer for Mr. Bridich. My mother's a huge baseball fan. Coached when I was growing up, was the president of the Little League. My senior year, she leased an apartment on DeWolf Street. She came out from California, missed my sister's senior prom, and was here the entire spring. She saw every game from April and May.
Wow.
And she was the one who loved baseball just about as much as anybody in our house. So I'm certain that she's happy that subscription to Baseball America is still coming to our house. She can still follow what we're doing.
Yeah, anybody that knows me knows how big an impact that my mother had in my life, and I think a couple just examples of that. One being I just spoke with Jack Toffee earlier tonight, who's here, and who is a sports agent, and who was talking to me as I was coming out of Harvard about potentially joining him. And one of the first memories he said, he's like, yeah, your mom was the one that was really doing most of the talking, and was the one that was, that was fighting on your behalf. And then one other one, actually, just tonight as well. Bob Hops, Scott, a bunch of our teammates here, was talking about his fight to get Harvard baseball championship rings, you know, after to recognize the success that these guys had. And some of the greatest support that he got within the friend group was my mom, who was not a baseball fan, who was not a sports person at all, and had no idea what was doing, has learned it completely on the fly. Was the type of person that would always support you, even when you were terrible, which was the most annoying thing ever. But you knew she was there, and I'm most definitely a product of her influence.
All right, Mr. Bridich. No, I wouldn't be here without my mom. I think back to Jeff, the story you said freshman year. My freshman year was a little rough as well, because I was doing football practice in the fall, but I wanted to start as a freshman, so I was going to baseball practice, going to baseball practice, then going to football practice, and then still trying to do studies. And I think when I first got here, I thought I was going to be an econ major. I ended up being a gov major, but I thought I was going to be an econ major, and I took Math 1B. I don't even know if they still have it.
They do? Yes. All right. We have sources confirm Math 1B still exists.
But there was nothing math about it. I was like, where are the numbers? It was like there were no numbers. And I got crushed my first semester at Harvard. And I remember I took a test, and my test came back. It looked like the Valentine's Day Massacre. There was so much red on it, grades I didn't even know existed. And I called back to my mother, and I was just like, I don't know about this, Mom. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. And she quickly shut me up and quickly gave me the pep talk that I needed. And I never looked back. But it's interesting, you talk about failure, and baseball is obviously a game of failure, and you deal with adversity so much, and I think that really reveals who you are. And you talk about, the adversity that you face when you're here, and this is the elite of the elite. We talk about being a Major League Baseball player. I mean, this is the top echelon, students in the world. You think about what your classmates are doing, and we've got classmates that are doing unbelievable things throughout in so many different industries. But when I graduated, you guys will find out, I think you only get 4 tickets to graduation.
Yep, 4.
When I graduated, my whole family graduated. I had 17 people at graduation because it was just a sense of pride, and when I was able to walk down the aisle, my whole family celebrated in that. And that was just so special, and that's what makes this place so special. It's so hard to get into, first of all, but then when you can graduate, it was something that my whole family shared in. And I think back to that call I had as a freshman, and I truly wanted no part of it. I'm like, what in the world am I doing with Math 1B? But we got through it. I became a gov major, and my mom and my dad were a big part of that.
And Peter?
Yeah, I don't think anyone here gets here without the family support. So, again, since my mom's not here and she's not going to watch it on TV, hopefully, but she knows, and I think my father, that I couldn't have gotten through it here to this point in my life without their support. So,
I guess I would just add that in my own undistinguished athletic career as a child, there were frequent weekends where I grew up like 2 hours north of Detroit, but all my parents' family was still in the Detroit area. So basically one weekend every month, we would drive down, the whole family, and I would miss practice, I'd miss games, and I would protest at length. Mom, I'm gonna get knocked off the blue team or the gray team, whatever it would be. And I would fight it, but I would go. And as much as it was a challenge then to be different and be sort of taken away from my friend group and my team group, I look back now and those are the best weekends ever, because you get a chance to learn from your grandparents and your aunts and uncles, the family stories, where you came from, the people that put you here, the relationships that you have. And so I think, especially as my grandparents have aged and passed on, I think you cherish those memories. So I think that to those of you that are sitting here in the front rows, remember, baseball is special, family is more special. So I take care of those relationships because baseball is, at its core, Dusty Baker has said this, baseball is a relationship. And it is. That's why we're all here, because of the relationships that we made at this amazing school and in this amazing program. So I want to thank these 5 gentlemen for just sharing so candidly their amazing insights on the game. Thank you all. And thanks to the Varsity Club, and thanks to the Friends group, Bob and Trevor and Jess and Dave O'Connell as well. And again, our sponsors tonight, Pete and Bo Bernhard, Bob Baxter, Jamie Crowley with Landvest, Christie's International Real Estate, Chris Mackey, and the McWiggin family as well, and of course, Mr. O'Donnell. Dave and Coach Decker are coming up now, I believe.
Powerful pen. You guys can help me with the box. Just wanted to say thank you. I'll keep it quick. Our players got back in last week, spent the week training on their own. Classes today, this has been a little bit of a long event for them, but I really appreciate their attention and certainly look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 7:50 a.m. So appreciate that. And just a logistical thing, the bus will leave 10 minutes after we're done here, get you back to campus. Special thanks to Dave O'Connell's done a tremendous job with our Friends group. It hasn't been easy, but this is such a great night to be the Joseph J. O'Donnell head coach of baseball because we tried to get people back together. And as you heard tonight, it's so, so important and really appreciate what you all done. And for Bob Glatz and the Varsity Club, Trevor and the whole crew, love the relationship that we have and really appreciate all you do for us. So hats go off. Chase Aldrich is here. Chase has been bugging me to meet some of the MLB guys, as we talked about. So I wanted to make sure that everybody was well aware who Chase is. Chase is a great person. Southern California guy, but certainly is a valuable member of our program and a tremendous clubhouse guy. So Chase will help me here, and Jared Lang. Jared Lang has a passion for baseball. He's our student manager, student assistant coach for the last 4 years. Although he's got a job next year with Budweiser, I know that his passion is baseball, and I'm hoping that maybe if you get Jared's resume at some point, you'll remember that, yeah, this is a guy that was at Harvard that went to Budweiser but wants to be in this great profession. So in no particular order, and I apologize if I got the sizes wrong. I went on these old pictures, so I just kind of guessed. But
overweight would have been a good guess.
You have me as a medium, coach?
Peter Woodfork. Jeff Bridich.
Extra large. Extra large for you guys. My dad got some gear.
David Forst. Ben Crockett. Michael Hill. And a special thank you to Jon Morosi. Appreciate you being here.
Okay, here we are at the end of the evening. I have to say that it just was brought to my attention that the last question we didn't have time for, but it was to ask the panel to discuss the impact of a mediocre mid-'80s shortstop. But time prevents us from getting into that, so we're not going to get into that story tonight. So I want to thank the panel too. Coach, thanks for saying a few words. We're all here tonight to really put our best foot forward. I'm so excited to be here and see this room, and we're excited as always to see you out in the field. I'll be there in Birmingham for that first weekend, so I'm excited to see you. So let's give a round of applause. So thanks to all of you for coming out. We're going to open that food up, and the bar's back open till 9:30. Please stay, ask any questions that didn't get covered. Thanks to all of you for being here, and we'll see you next year. Good night.